Hello, welcome again to another Atypical Philosopher video. This is a Ukraine War Update Extra with myself, Jonathan M.S. Pierce. This is where I give you the juicy nuggets to get your teeth into, to give you a greater taste for the whole landscape of this war in Ukraine, geopolitical landscape, military landscape, and strategic understanding and context. Okay, where should we start? It's time to give some props to a country I've not given any props to so far. Croatia to provide 14 Mi-8 helicopters to Ukraine in exchange for Black Hawk helicopters. So again, this is a case of giving props to a country without actually knowing the full details here. So are they giving those helicopters, or are they being given 14? So on the one hand, I say, yeah, well done, Croatia. Are they being given 14 better helicopters? Are they paying for those 14 better helicopters? Where are those better helicopters coming from? The Black Hawks? Probably America. How's America involved in this? Who's being the most kind? But anyway, either way, Ukraine get 14 helicopters, which is fantastic. So that's definitely going to be a boon for them. Thank you, Croatia. Germany, props to Germany, announced another aid package to Ukraine. They're really coming up trumps at the moment. So Mars 2 MLRS ammunition. Ammunition super important, especially for these multiple launch rocket systems. 3 M1070 Oshkosh semi-trailers. 17 border guard vehicles. Spare parts for heavy machine gun M2. Stuff like that. You forget that it's just absolutely vital. You know, when these bits of equipment start breaking down, you need to fix them, and if you don't have the spare parts, then there's no point in having that piece of equipment. 24 MG3 machine guns for armored recovery vehicles, 116 field heaters, and 10 anti-drone sensors and jammers. So that's super important. You know, if you can make a drone fall out of the sky, then that's as good as shooting it down, right? So fantastic. Thank you, Germany. On the other hand, now I know about 50% of my viewers get annoyed if I have a go at Donald Trump. So I am not going to have a go at Donald Trump. I'm going to report to you other people having a go at Donald Trump Jr. Okay. I might have a go at him as well. So here's Ilya Ponomarenko, who's a great Kyiv independent reporter, saying, we need a name for a mental condition under which such a statement is considered sane and serious. So if you support Ukraine, and if you support the US supporting Ukraine, Donald Trump Jr. is, well, he's basically really annoyed a lot of people. So since it was Ukraine's missile that hit our NATO ally Poland, so he's now sort of blaming Ukraine for hitting Poland. And, you know, there is a conversation to be had around there. But can we at least stop spending billions to arm them now? So it's like, okay, Ukraine has a surface to air missile has landed in Poland from Ukraine. Let's stop giving them billions of dollars of support. And you can imagine how that has annoyed Ukrainians. Anyway, I just thought you guys can decide what you think about that, but I would say that is deeply unhelpful from Donald Trump Jr. Here is Russia getting a bunch of self-propelled guns. Don't know where they're being delivered, but if you look at this, that name there, Bilokurakny. This is really interesting because I told you this morning, and I've only just made this link now, but I told you this morning that that was hit by HIMARS. And I wonder whether it was these that were hit. Those self-propelled guns. So the talk was a column of, you know, equipment was hit. Well, this looks like it might be on a train, but it's a column of equipment. Very interesting. Very interesting. So HIMARS doing a bit of a job on that. And this then makes you realize how important videos like this hitting social media are. Of course, it can be a risk on the other side. Absolutely. You know, you don't want to be showing where your own equipment is equally. I keep showing you stuff like this because it's so super important. A warehouse full of 120mm mortars, much welcome. Ukrainian soldiers captured a Russian warehouse of very scarce ammunition, so very rare ammunition, it means, for 120mm mortars, or there is a scarce amount of this in the stocks of the Ukrainians at the moment. Be quickly sent in the opposite direction. Just look at how much stuff is in here. This is like a super important treasure trove, a bounty for the Ukrainians here. That kind of ordnance, those stocks in a warehouse, and there's undoubtedly more to be seen in there. Really important. Okay, moving on to Ukrainians. I'm not going to read this article, but it is a bit of investigative journalism done by the Wall Street Journal. Ukrainian intelligence finds Western supply chain behind Iran's drones used by Russia in Ukraine. Sorry, that's not necessarily investigative journalism. It's reporting what the Ukrainian intelligence have investigated. A new analysis shows that components of Iranian drones, including Mohajer 6, were produced by US, Japanese, and Israeli companies. Pretty much what I've said before. With regard to the Shahed drones, and I don't know if you remember, I went through an article talking about how they got, bits and pieces from China, from Austria, from all over the place to make those. It's difficult because they often get these things and co-opt them. So they get them perfectly legally, but then they use them to make things that they're not sanctioned to make. So it's going to be a difficult thing to solve, that one. Russian nationals have transferred over $30 billion abroad from January to September 2022, an absolute record in the history of the statistic compiled by the Bank of Russia. So this is representative of the fact that rich Russians, or people with at least some decent money, have recognized that it's probably not the best idea to keep it in Russia, given what was going on and what is going on. So they've shipped it abroad. What that means in terms of the Russian economy, I don't know. I'll have to look into that. But $30 billion is no small amount of money. Although perhaps it is to, I don't know, Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos. I saw this. I'll probably try and read this as well because some people just listen to this. So this is a video that someone, actually two people, posted on one of my threads, because I was talking about how important the golden hour is, which is a time between a soldier getting hit and injured and needing to get to a hospital, some kind of field hospital, for them to get fixed up. And if you don't do that in an hour, then they're done for. It's very difficult to keep them alive, on the edge. They just need treatment quickly, and the quicker you can get them treatment, obviously, the more likely they are to survive. That's pretty obvious, but that's called the golden hour. And I showed you a BBC report yesterday in yesterday's Extra about Ukrainian doctors and nurses working on a front line. Unfortunately, that video's gone now. I don't know what. Thought about that. So that's showing how important these guys are for supporting the Ukrainian troops. And that could be the difference in the Ukrainian and Russian forces, because some statistics or some analysts are suggesting that although the casualty figures are broadly the same, more Russians are dying than Ukrainians. And it could be that they just don't have access to the kind of the doctors and medical support that the Ukrainians have. And here's a Russian doctor who was a POW giving her account. I saw an announcement on social networks about recruitment of servicemen to the territory of the DNR. So I called, and she pauses a bit here. I took a course in security at a security school, and there was basic medical training. I was told that I had to go to Novorazovsk, to the military enlistment office. There I had to take a mobilization order and go to the unit. When they took me to the assault, which took place on October the 11th, I, as a paramedic, had to, provide first aid, help the evacuation group. And just before the assault, a few hours before it, I learned that I had to be on the Becher, an infantry fighting vehicle, with the main assault team. That might be something like a BMP. I wasn't given a medical bag. I only had the first aid kit, the one I had in my chest rig. The main group ran in an unknown direction. There were 5 of us left. When I began to request evacuation, they didn't answer for a long time, which is actually something I've heard quite a lot, like people asking to be evacuated and got out of a particular situation, and comms are down, they're just not answered, and they're left to get on with it on their own. Here's a paramedic whose job it is to be a medic there. She's not there to do the fighting. She's there to give medical support, and she's only got a tiny medical kit from her chest rig. There you go. Well, they promised and promised that they would take us through the grey zone. They promised they would or wouldn't. I began to ask to somehow bring a medical kit because we ran out of dressing packs and neither my nor the guy's bleeding stopped. So she's injured as well. We hoped there would still be an evacuation. But then we already understood that they would not come for us. Then I felt dizzy from the blood loss and lost consciousness. I woke up on a stretcher. I was carried by Ukrainian soldiers. That's just a tiny little snippet to give you an understanding of perhaps the medical support for Ukrainian soldiers, and this could be worse in the DPR, LPR units, I don't know, is not good. And that could go some way to explaining the difference in fatality rates between the two sides. This is another Lancet loitering munition, which is a real thorn in the side of the Ukrainians. At least it would be more of a thorn if it actually hit operable equipment. Here is a 5N63S engagement radar, the S300PS surface-to-air missile system. But there's one issue. This is a decoy based on a derelict vehicle missing many critical parts such as power supply units and telescoping antenna. Now, it makes you wonder whether the Russians, this is live footage they're getting, the Russians, and if it is, can't they tell between a decoy and a working SAM system? But here is the munition that is loitering, the drone is loitering, so it should be able to look at things closely, and you should be able to have an expert that tells you, yeah, that's a real thing, rather than a vehicle that's just had loads of bits of stuff put on top of it to make it look like a SAM system. Anyway, they've looked at it because you've had the footage you just seen, and then it sort of circles around to come back in to take it out. Bang. And that is doing exactly what a decoy should do, which is wasting the resource, the time, and the effort, money of that loitering munition doing that. I'm sure they're doing this all over the shop, but my thoughts would be, if I was in charge of the Ukrainian army, I'd just be making so many decoys that you would just the Russians just wouldn't know what was what. But I guess maybe if you have too many, then they'd be even more careful. Then they would start being more accurate. Maybe, I don't know. There's probably a sweet spot of the amount of decoys to make. This is the problem. Whenever I say anything, I question myself and question any opinion I have. What video? A pair of soldiers inspecting 2 abandoned Russian 2S-19M2 M-Star SM2 152 self-propelled guns and destroyed Kamaz supply truck until a presumed BM-21 Grad rocket artillery barrage begins to hit the ground nearby. This is war, right? So here they are, checking out the stuff. Oh, look at this. Yeah, this is pretty mad. Look at, go and look at that other one. And they're just walking around. So the video goes on, and then just walking about this equipment, then going into the wooded bits to look for stuff or whatnot.
Та вони погорівші всі тут. Ось управляємо, кстати, лежать. А? Та їх тут, бач, перемісили, блядь, пізда як. Тихо. А, хуйня. Блядь, рядом хуярь, гради. Ёбаный в рот, нахуй. Объебывать по припаду. Надо въебывать пока при пам'яті. Щось вони тут активно хуярять.
Тебе в'їбало чи що? Та, блядь.
So that gives you a sense of what it must be like, and how scary it must be to operate in places like that and under the threat of such attacks. Interesting that some of those rocket casings had blue and yellow bands around them. I don't know whether they were the rockets that took out these vehicles. Anyway, I'm sure someone will be able to let me know what they think. Who was it that said sanctions aren't hurting Russia? Putin, Lavrov, all of the terrorists? Looks like it's getting real in Moscow. Even in the TV studio. So what do these propagandists have to say? Let's go nationalize. Let's go nationalize. Let's take everything from the Germans. We will have sapsans. Tomorrow they will be. What will we ride on? On rubber? We have nothing to ride on. But we must admit it, of course. It is easy to stand on an armoured car and say, let's nationalize everything. Let's. And what are we going to ride on? What are we going to call? What are we going to do? Did we bring this to this? Let's, I don't know, bring to responsibility those who brought this. Let's. But this will not appear. Sapsan is not now new. The plane will not appear. We do not have a long-range aircraft. Yes, we have everything Western. Please, we are nationalising now. And what are we going to do the next day? What are we going to do? A simple question. There is no answer. And so, of course, everyone agrees with you. So it's a bit confusing as to what they're really talking about. But the point is, they're all arguing about why don't we have X and Y and Z? Well, we need to nationalise our industry to get these. It's just indicative of the trouble that Russia are in. And the panic that is starting to set in amongst those who are the most vehement nationalist sort of supporters of the Russian attack, and the understanding that they don't have the things that they should have because of corruption, because of Iranian, because of this idea of and I said I was going to talk about that actually, the idea that there's so much corruption in the armed forces that the money has gone elsewhere to where it should have done, which is buying decent stuff that the troops should be using now. I mean, if all the money that Russia spent on its armed forces over the last 20 years actually ended up doing what it was supposed to do, who knows? Russia could have won this war already. But because of the rank corruption endemic across the whole nation, really, they are left fighting a war that they are clearly losing because they don't have the kit that they arguably should have. Okay, yesterday there was a press conference, a joint press conference with General Mark Milley, US Armed Forces, and I think Lloyd Austin, the Defense Secretary. I haven't watched it, but apparently it was really interesting and really good. And Mark Milley was actually, because he said some fairly controversial things recently, but and talking about negotiation stuff. And there's a little bit of that here, but there was some, interesting snippets coming out that I was reading. Milley explaining logic of trying to negotiate political solution when at position of strength on the ground, says essentially Russia can't overrun the country and Russian military hurting badly. So that's really interesting. The understanding in the US military that Russia is hurting badly and they cannot win in the sense of being able to take over Ukraine. I mean, we've known this for some time. Like Russia can't even take Bakhmut, let alone the entire country of Ukraine. So they are screwed. Now, at least in terms of that larger strategic goal. What Milley is saying here is that when you are in this position of strength, that's a good time to negotiate. So he's saying that But he says the probability that Ukraine can totally kick Russia out of the 20% of the remaining territory that it controls is doing that soon is low. So it says getting Russia out of Crimea and the Donbass, the Luhansk and Donetsk areas that they've had, since 2014, that is a low probability that Ukraine could do that. And so therefore, I think he's saying here that this is the peak advantage that that Ukraine will have against Russia. So now's a good time to negotiate. You've got Russia against the wall. Get as much as you can in a negotiation. And Shashank Joshi says, okay, but I'd like to see Milley's assessment of Ukraine restoring the February 24th lines, which is very different to liberating the 20% Crimea plus pre-war occupied Donbass and probability of severing a land bridge. Inability to take everything is not a reason to seek settlement now. So he's saying that, are you talking about like now you're in a position of strength, but actually still Russia control Zaporizhia and parts of northern Luhansk, areas that really Ukraine look like they're going to take imminently. Now's not the time to negotiate. Arguably, it'll be when, at the very least, you've pushed Russia back to the 2014 lines. And then there's interesting discussion to be had on, what is a realistic end game. Is it the Zelensky line that Russia will not be in Ukraine at all? Is that achievable? Is it achievable to get them out of Crimea? Is it achievable to get them out of the Donbass? What do the people that live there also think? Do they want, again, the question is, who are they? So Russia brought in a lot of Russians, ethnic Russians, into Crimea after 2014 to kind of bolster up the population to be pro-Russian. So if you ask them all now, who do you want to be living under, the Russians or the Ukrainians? They'll probably say the Russians. Well, is that and the people who are pro-Ukrainian had left that area, had left Crimea to go and live in Kiev and Lviv and these places. Well, actually, if those people went back and if you got Crimea back to broadly what it was, like, who would they support? So these are difficult things to try and unpick, but it's interesting to wonder whether Ukraine do have a really realistic and decent chance of taking back the entire country, including the 2014 annexed regions, and what the people there would actually want themselves. Discussion in the threads below, no doubt. Kiev Independence says, what is the Russian goal? The Russian goal seems to be to entrench and defend for the next several months, and then attempt a new offensive in the Donbass in 2023. Maybe this is when the mobilized troops are better trained, and by trained I mean they've been sat on the front line for 6 months getting shot at. It's on the job training, right? So back in 2023, it could be that they've survived the winter, they've been able to reconstitute somehow, get a load of stuff from North Korea, Iran, I don't know, and be in a better position to go on an offensive. Is that their goal? I keep asking. I was talking to Tim White yesterday, and I always ask myself, what is Putin trying to do? What does he want to do? What should he do? If I was Putin, what would I do? But it's all like, what's his goal? What's his end game? What's the bare minimum of what he would accept as an off-ramp out of this? And the answer is I don't really know. Ukraine, says the Kiev Independent, can disrupt this process by keeping up pressure over the winter. Absolutely. The winter should not be a period of taking a foot off the pedal. They should be arguably pressuring Russia even more. Strike while the iron is hot and the momentum is moving in their direction. The last thing I'm going to talk about is Stremousov, who was the Kherson collaborator leader, who was driving out of Kherson when Kherson was looking like it was being lost. He was driving down, I think, down south of Zaporizhia, in the Zaporizhia Oblast, somewhere on the highway, and had a car crash at night, crash into a van or a truck or something, and died. And then there were these images that came out of him having taken his seatbelt away from his car. In previous selfies he had taken in his car, there was no seatbelt unit. So they're like, oh, you shouldn't drive without a seatbelt. Well, it could be slightly more, insidious than that. On the Melitopol highway, the remains of Kirill Stremousov's wrecked car were not removed for several days in a row. The car looks like it was also shot with small arms weapon. The damage on the armoured glass and on the door resemble bullet marks. So here is obviously one armoured glass bullet mark. It's very typical, but also these are all bullet holes. And you can see bullet holes here as well. It looks like this vehicle was shot at. And if it was shot at, then maybe he didn't just have a little car crash on the Militopol highway, but indeed was taken out maybe by partisans, maybe by the Russians themselves, as he was sort of running away from Kherson, and overseeing what was a bit of a PR loss for the Russians. So interesting. And one other thing, actually, because I almost forgot this, I said I was going to show you this video. This is a video, it's a 9-minute video of a tank battle that Andrew Perpetua has uploaded to his Twitter account. It's elsewhere on Twitter, I think, as well. This took place, and I did report this, took place in Pervomaisky, this is the Avdivka area I've talked about every day. And just to the south of that, you've got the Opitny, Vodyanye, the Pisky, and pushing through to Pervomaisky. You look at Pervomaisky and you think, oh, right, this is a long, thin town, and there'll be all these buildings there, and you just imagine just a normal suburban landscape that is just caught in a war. Actually, it's pretty apocalyptic. So this is, Andrew Perpetua says, I wrote about a large tank attack here several days ago. I don't know if this is the attack, but it's the same town and about the right number of tanks. And that was when he talked about it before, 10 tanks plus infantry and their BMP, so the infantry fighting vehicles and whatnot. In this video, we see, broadly speaking, tanks, really, a few tanks. I'm not going to show you it all, just snippets of kind of what it's like. It is, it's a mixture of the drones. It's quite well edited together, actually, because you see the drones and then the same thing that the drone's just seen from the tank's point of view, or vice versa. So here you can see the river across a bridge across the river. There you got a bunch of tanks, lots of smoke around the place, and then again, I mentioned this with Makivka, just the destruction. I mean, look at that! Look at that absolute carnage there, and the carnage of all the trees. The trees are just these single kind of trunks. All the branches being blown off, just everything is completely destroyed. It's pretty apocalyptic, this video. So this is the tank firing its machine gun out of the front. This is from a Russian tank's point of view, and yeah, you see inside the tank, you see the drone, you see the tank, and it's kind of like a mix between all these three viewpoints. Pretty close to being hit there. Bit of return fire. You can actually see the projectile that hits. Don't know exactly what it is. Mortar. It's got quite an up and down trajectory. And this sort of goes on. I'll just skip through. I mean, again, actually that's worth just dwelling on there. So again, the tank is just here. We've just seen the tank looking at this building, and you see the explosion in front of it. But then look at all these other buildings. Just absolutely heartbreaking, really. Every one of those buildings was some family's life. You know, and so on and so forth. Automatic loading mechanism, which means you need one less person in the tank. This guy is sighting. But it's hard to work out exactly what their objectives are here, what they're doing. Can't really see any of the what is to them enemy combatants. There are explosions all around. Things are happening. That people are firing this way and that, but I don't know exactly what these guys are intending to do. And then eventually they should just start retreating. They launch off smoke there to cover their retreat. So that's the smoke that you see launched. And why they retreat like this rather than turn around and go the other way is that their rear armor is their weakest point of their armor. So it's much better to reverse rather than to turn around and go backwards, because if you get hit from the rear, you're in even more trouble. And whether this is, you know, artillery shelling or tank rounds, I don't know. As you can see, they're absolutely, you know, eating through their ordnance on board, their rounds. Oh dear, I'm gonna be careful of that. And there you go. There was 9 minutes of that. It's all pretty similar. Them driving up, back, firing all the time, receiving fire, but. Yeah, and seeing all the destruction around them, that is a tank battle going on. Make of that what you will. Anyway, thank you for hanging out during my rambling journey through social media, so you don't have to. That's my job. Thank you for all your support. Please like, subscribe, share. There's Buy Me a Coffee and PayPal and YouTube thanks and all those ways of helping out, or just, you know, watch YouTube videos and engage with them. Thank you for everything. I will see you tomorrow. Toodle pips.